Hello and welcome to Movies You Missed, the podcast where we discussed criminally underrated and unseen movies. I am your host, Jace Cudler, and this episode is the third in the sequel summer series that we've been doing of underrated sequels. We came at you first with RoboCop 2, and then Halloween 2, and then Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday, aka Friday the 13th, Part 9. And today, we're coming in hot with Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare. I don't think I've ever revealed the movie this early, but, I'm getting straight to it. So yeah, today continues our sequel summer, but also, I guess, kind of puts a cap on our mini slasher series within that series, because we did a Michael, a Jason, now we're doing a Freddy, and then the rest of the movies I think will be non-slashers, maybe even non-horror. I don't remember. I think I have the list here somewhere. But yeah, so we're covering Freddy 6 today. Very underrated movie. Hated by critics and fans alike, but loved by this fan and hopefully a lot of others out there. And this movie really isn't as bad as everyone says, of course. That's the whole premise of the show. Could you imagine if I was just like, this movie is really bad, and then just talked about it for 2 hours? That wouldn't make any sense. Not what we do here. If we're talking about a movie here, it's because we like it. But yeah, so as far as sequel summer goes, some business up front before we get into it. Well, I hope everyone's doing well. Today I'm recording the episode from my bedroom / office, I guess. It's Sunday, July 31st, 2022. It's about 3 in the afternoon. It's about 78 degrees outside, sunny. It's really a beautiful day. Beautiful day to be inside recording a podcast. So yeah, I'd say we're about halfway through sequel summer at this point. I know I initially said I think I was going to do 9, but I think I'm going to end up shortening it to 8. Please don't hate me. But I just, things going on. Doing one of these every single week is very hard. Working full time and having family obligations and social events and getting the correct amount of sleep and eating and, taking care of myself and whatnot. So yeah, I think we're gonna do 4 more, and I'm doing like a traditional calendar summer here, where I'm gonna do 4 or 5. We'll see. I'm still on the fence, kind of. 4 or 5 episodes in the next 7 weeks. So August begins tomorrow. There's 4 weeks in August, and then I'm gonna go. Summer officially ends September 22nd, I think. So I'm gonna release some episodes in that 3-week span in the beginning of September, even though it's basically fall. Sorry, long pause. Even though it's basically fall, I'm gonna technically be like, yeah, let's just make it summer though, just to squeeze more episodes in there. Just like, I don't know, because I didn't really start this sequel summer until June. Sometime in June, I think we started. But in reality, the real beginning of summer is like after Memorial Day. Memorial Day kind of kicks off summer, basically. And man, has this summer just flew by, hasn't it? Time flies when you're having fun, or whatever they say. But yeah, well, and that's the thing too. I need these breaks. I can't really do an episode a week. Simply because I don't plan on stopping, and I'm like a real person with like a full-time job that is not this. So, hopefully if you'll permit me some slack, that would be much obliged. Also, I mean, like literally, we're gonna go into September 21st, and then I think I'm gonna do like maybe 3 or 4 fall episodes that are gonna be strictly Halloween horror movie related. I haven't figured out what we're gonna do with that yet, but we're gonna go straight into that, and then after that, we're gonna do a long winter season where I'm gonna try to do as many episodes as possible over the winter, only because there's not as much to do. And people need this content, this type of content, not specifically mine, but like this type of content, like inside activities, I guess, more than ever before in the winter. And I've got some potential things lined up for like that mini Halloween season. I don't know if I want to do like 3 Halloween movies or just like 3 loosely related horror movies, maybe all by the same director or all in one series or something like that. I'm not sure. And for the winter season, I think I'm either going to do fantasy movies or erotic thriller movies. So I'm weighing those options. Assembling lists of movies for both, because I do want to do both at some point, but I don't know which one we will inevitably do this winter. And I'm recording here from an undisclosed location in Ohio, so our winters are like 6 months long. So 6 months times 4 weeks, 24 weeks. That's not going to equate to 24 episodes, but like anywhere between like maybe like 15 to 20. So just because of course I love doing this, it's very fun, it's a great time, but sometimes things just get in the way. But I would do it all the time if I could, trust me. But yeah, sorry, that was a loud I saw it register. But anyway, yes. Today we're talking about Freddy's Dead, 6th installment in the Nightmare on Elm Street series. Nightmare on Elm Street, of course, is one of the big 3 like slasher horror franchises, I guess. When everyone thinks of these kind of movies, they think Halloween, they think Friday the 13th, they think Nightmare on Elm Street. And Friday the 13th and Halloween, like I said, we've already covered some movies from those series. I've covered Halloween 2. I've covered Friday the 13th, Part 5 and Part 9. Because listen, not only are these movies wildly popular, hence spawning many, many sequels, but they're also personal favorites of mine. And I know a lot of the audience loves them too, like the audience of this show, aka my friends and family, and then whoever else is out there listening. I'm sure you love these too, but yeah, I mean, as long as we're gonna keep going with this, I plan to do several more movies from these series, like next summer, unless something horrible befalls me. I plan on doing this exact thing again, where I talk about 8 or 9 more underrated sequels, and you just better believe that a couple of those episodes will be Halloween 3 or Halloween Resurrection, Friday the 13th Part 7 or 3, or maybe even Freddy versus Jason, or Jason X, or like Nightmare on Elm Street Part 5, Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2. Any of those are fair game. So realistically, one of those is going to be in the sequel summer, like the next 2 or 3 summers. But yeah, today we'll just get down to it. And you'll have announcements when I know. I don't know. I'm flying by the seat of my pants here. I don't know what I'm doing day to day, let alone months in advance. So, we'll play it by ear. I'll let you know. For the Halloween, I actually haven't even considered what I'm going to do for that one yet, which I should, because it's literally the one that comes right after this. But I don't know. By failing to prepare, you prepare to fail. Why'd I even say that? I don't know. But because it's not going to fail, it's going to be pretty good. Trust me. So yeah, today, like I said a million times, we're talking about Freddy's Dead: Final Nightmare, an American slasher film, and the 6th film in the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. This film follows a victorious Freddy, if you will. This movie takes place 10 years, supposedly, after the events of A Nightmare on Elm Street 5, The Dream Child. another banger that we will indeed cover on this show. But yeah, in this movie, it's 10 years later, and Freddy has successfully killed all of the children on Elm Street and in Springwood, Ohio as a whole. Except for one child, which he is attempting to use as like a doorway to enter different towns and terrorize new children there. And a therapist, played by Lisa Zane, attempts to help this one last child and stop Freddy once and for all. And she has like a mysterious connection to all of it. The film was released in 1991 by New Line Cinema. Grossed $39.4 million against a budget of about, of between $9 and $11 million. So it was bocce ball success. It was a box office success. I guess before I get into all this, I should say that what my history with this franchise is. Like I said, Nightmare on Elm Street is definitely one of my faves. I think it's like, for me, one of the more consistent ones, I think, because unlike even Friday the 13th and definitely Halloween, I think I like pretty much every single installment in this series. I mean, I guess there's less because there's only like 6, 7, 8 of them, whereas there's like 12 Friday the 13th and then like 11 Halloweens. And of course, I think even this franchise has like the weak spots, which is like, well, the weak spot, I guess, because it's only one, and that would be the 2010 remake that by Samuel Bayer with Jackie Earle Haley and Rooney Mara. That movie's just not good. I don't care for it at all. It takes everything that's fun about these movies away and adds a bunch of stuff that is not scary or tense, really, and it's just so dark and kind of joyless, and there isn't a moment of levity while also not really being scary. So it's like it doesn't do anything for me. And even though I considered doing a season of remakes and reboots, I don't think that one will ever be on it, unlike the 2009 Friday the 13th remake, which will definitely be there. Yeah, we all know how I feel about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre reboot, which was covered in a previous episode if you want to go check that out, in the first season. But yeah, and then because as I was saying, this franchise is very, to me personally, I find it very enjoyable and watchable, and I find all the installments, like 1 through 6, and then Wes Craven's New Nightmare, I find all those movies pretty watchable, and you can pretty much throw them on at any time, and I won't object. Whereas with Friday the 13th, if you throw on Jason Takes Manhattan, I'll lose it. You know what I mean? Because I hate that movie so much. And then I guess like Jason X to a certain extent I don't really care for. But it's not terrible. I'd say Friday the 13th and Elm Street are pretty much even, actually. And that they really only have like one installment that I don't care for. Whereas Halloween, like if you put out either of those two Rob Zombie remakes, I'll probably walk out. Or even like Halloween 5, can't stand it. I don't really care for Halloween Kills either, which just came out like earlier this year. Last year, I think. 2021, 2022, one of them. But yeah, didn't necessarily care for that one. Wouldn't really want to watch it at any given time. So I think Halloween definitely has like the biggest like hills and valleys. And it's definitely like the least consistent, even though of course Halloween 1978, Halloween 2, Halloween 3, Halloween 4, all great. They were on the up and up. But then 5 is truly bad. 6, better. H2O and Resurrection, pretty good. The remakes, bad. Halloween 2018, good. Kills, bad. Yeah, so I think they just have trouble following up a lot of the times when they make good movies in that series. But anyway, yeah, I've been watching the Nightmare on Elm Street series since I was like a little kid, they'd come on TV. They'd be on AMC, and I would there'd be like a marathon all day, like during in the weeks surrounding Halloween, leading up to Halloween. They'd be like, all right, On this Tuesday, we're playing all of the Nightmare on Elm Streets. Or it'd be like a Saturday. And I'd be like, all right, well, I guess this is what I'm doing today. As a 12-year-old, I'm just going to watch all of these movies. Or like we'd run them on DVD and stuff. I've seen like pretty much all these movies a million times, except for Wes Craven's New Nightmare. I think I only saw that like maybe like a year ago, maybe, because I didn't really have any interest in like meta stuff, meta like stories, and when I was 12, I didn't really care about that. I was just like, oh, so it's not the real Freddy? No thanks. And as it turns out, I think I had only seen the first one in parts until I watched it like 3 years ago, and then I didn't really care for the first one as much until I recently watched it like a month ago, and I really, really loved it. So it's interesting how viewing a movie multiple times can somehow garner different results. Because I've always loved 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. I could just say 2 through 6 and just keep it shorter. I've always loved those movies. I've seen those movies a million times starting back when I was a little kid. Particularly 3 and 4 and 5 were always on TV. And I loved all of them. It was only recently that I got a real appreciation for 1. Who knows why. But yeah, love the series. Longtime fan. I have them all on VHS. And then I have them all on DVD in the Nightmare on Elm Street collection, which, comes with the documentary and all that. Speaking of documentaries, I've seen Never Sleep Again, the documentary on the making of and the history of these movies. I've seen that twice. Really good documentary. Hosted by Heather Langenkamp herself, who plays Nancy Thompson in parts 1 and 3, and then herself in Wes Craven's New Nightmare. So yeah, big time fan. I'm coming to this, recording this episode from a place of love. You know what I mean? Speaking of love, I got a lot of love for the director of this movie, Rachel Talalay. Who is like a longtime producer and special effects wizard on the first 4 of these movies, before getting to direct this one. And she's directed a lot of Doctor Who episodes and Flash episodes, both shows that I really like. So I got a lot of love and respect for her. And also, she's the only female to direct a Nightmare on Elm Street movie. I think of like the big 3 slashers, she's the only woman to direct a movie in any of them. So that's pretty cool. And unfortunately, woman directors were simply kind of hard to come by back then, even like in 1991. So I just I think I got a lot of respect for her. She put in her time. Started from kind of like the bottom and then worked her way up to helming her own movie. So good for her. And I think the direction of this movie is pretty good. I think a lot of some of the what people don't like, I think, can be attributed to like a lot of script stuff. But I think the direction of this movie is kind of pretty solid. And so this movie directed by Rachel Talalay, but written by Michael DeLuca, who wrote In the Mouth of Madness, which is a favorite John Carpenter movie of mine. I love that movie with Sam Neill. Came out, I think, like sometime in the 90s, 1994 maybe. Loved it. Like a spiritual sequel to like The Thing and Prince of Darkness, called like John Carpenter's Apocalypse trilogy. So he wrote that. That was a crazy movie. I'd love to cover that on this show. And he also is credited with the story for Judge Dredd, the Stallone one, which is pretty good too. And he also is like a mega producer, and he executive produced like Magnolia and like Seven and Fight Club and like a bunch of movies. I think he was responsible for getting like Paul Thomas Anderson and David Fincher's careers off the ground. So he's a solid guy, heavy hitter in the film industry. So the film stars, like I said earlier, Lisa Zane, who was in LA Law and ER, and she had a lot of guest spots on TV and stuff. Robert Englund, naturally, is Freddy Krueger. Robert Englund, of course, is like one of the few. Is like Robert Englund is synonymous with Freddy Krueger. Unlike like a single Freddy or Jason actor, maybe aside from like Kane Hodder, I guess. But Freddy is played in every installment by Robert Englund, except for, of course, the reboot. But yeah, so I mean, and he's great. I guess like the reason is that like I think everybody universally loves his portrayal of Freddy, and because he did it in like the first 7 movies, is like the reason that he's like so beloved, and that he's like pretty much like I said, synonymous with the character. Newcomers that I've never seen in anything else: Sean Greenblatt, Ricky Dean Logan, and Leslie Dean. And then also this is Breckin Meyer's feature film debut. Breckin Meyer, who was in Franklin and Bash and Clueless, and he does a lot of stuff with Robot Chicken. And then also Yaphet Kotto is in this movie. Yaphet Kotto is like a film legend. He was in Alien. He was in The Running Man. And he played the villain Kananga, Dr. Kananga, in Live and Let Die, the Roger Moore James Bond movie. R.I.P. Yaphet Kotto. I think he passed away maybe a year ago. But yeah, great actor. Pretty good in this movie too. Not sure why he would volunteer to be in this movie. Maybe his career had taken a turn by 1991, but he was pretty great. Runtime for this movie is 89 minutes, so picture perfect runtime. Just under an hour and a half. Quick watch, but quick enough where there's not a lot of stuff that I'm like, it's just like it's quick to the point where I'm like, oh, this isn't like feeling rushed. I feel like they could have done like more. I feel like it's pretty decently paced, but also like there's not a lot of fat on it. There's not a lot of stuff I would trim. So, but yeah, like I said, people hate this movie. Not as much as I think they hated Jason Goes to Hell. But look at the scores of this movie. It's pretty low. Rotten Tomatoes 24%. IMDb 4.7 out of 10. Metacritic 39%. But of course, Google users, 79% of them liked it. So how did I watch this? Like I said, I have the Nightmare on Elm Street collection box set, and I watched it that way. But it's streaming for free on HBO Max if you wanted to go that route. And why would someone miss this movie? As per usual, abysmal reviews. The reviews came out for this movie, and it was pretty much panned, I think, by everybody. No one really liked it. And that kind of thing does deter people, whether you like it or not. Because I think this one had like a huge opening weekend. I think it had like the highest grossing opening weekend for a Nightmare movie at that time. But then I think it quickly fell off and petered out the subsequent weekends because of how bad the reviews were. And then I think at the same time, a lot of people probably didn't see it then because Part 5, too, The Dream Child, had not been well received either. People didn't care for that one. And I think just like in the case with like Friday the 13th Part 5, people didn't really like that one, so no one really saw Part 6, even though Part 6 is really good. If you check the box office for that one, at that point Friday had just started down this slippery slope where like the box office returns were just diminishing with every movie. But yeah, so I think if you have a bad installment, it will deter people from seeing the next one regardless if it's good or not. And then people will be like, oh, so it's terrible? I'm definitely not seeing it. And then I think nowadays, what keeps people away is the fact that it's a 6th installment in a horror series. You know what I mean? Like, I think unless you're like Marvel or something, I think getting people to watch a 6th movie is like a little... Because I think people think like, man, there's no way that a 6th movie is good. There's no way they can keep that up. Because I mean, to be fair, people really do that. Sorry, big yawn. But yeah, I mean, like I'll think of reading a book series, and I'll be like, how many books are there? 10? I don't think so. That's a lot. That's a big investment. Even if they're all good, I mean, Like my friends currently are like, we want to watch the Resident Evil movies, and I'm like, that might be a slog, man. I don't know. Even if those movies are really good, which I don't think they are. But again, I guess that's just me thinking based off reviews. They could be very good. Who knows? But it's just like, I'm like, man, if it's literally like a series of like 7 or 8 bad movies, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to get to 7 or 8. You know what I mean? So yeah, I think those kind of things will keep people away, definitely. Um, but I don't know. I think there's like, and I'll get to this later, of course, when I sum that kind of stuff up. But I think there's a lot to like about this movie. It's definitely very of the time. It definitely doesn't feel like a distinctly 80s horror movie like the other ones kind of did. It definitely like feels kind of 90s, especially like the humor and horror elements are kind of like um, batshit crazy and like nonsensical, almost like a Twin Peaks esque thing. They actually even reference Twin Peaks in this movie, which I thought was funny. But yeah, so like it's like definitely unorthodox, but definitely still a fun time if you can make that adjustment, which I know a lot of fans of the series have trouble doing. I think especially when you're like a huge fan of a series and the series diverts from like what it's been known to do and it takes a chance and it kind of changes stuff up, that people like really hate it. And sometimes I think it's hard to tell if a movie is like truly good or not if you're talking to a fan, because it's just like, oh, do you not like this just because it's different and you can't get out of the headspace to enjoy a movie because it's different from what you normally like and people don't like change, or is it actually bad? You know, it's kind of hard to see sometimes. Because I gotta say this movie is very different from a lot of the other Nightmare on Elm Street movies. Um, and if you watch the first one and then you compare it to this one, you'll be like, man, how did they possibly get there? But it's just like, I don't know. I mean, I guess you have to adapt or you die, right? Um, it's just like I think Wes Craven's New Nightmare is like a very interesting movie, but I don't think people really care for that one a lot either because it's so different and because it's like not their Freddy. Um, but anyway, we can go ahead and get into this beat by beat if you'd like. 27 minutes into the show. So Freddy's Dead: The Final Nightmare starts off, I think, like the last couple have, if I'm not mistaken, that they start off with a quote. I think that started with Dream Warriors, and then the trend is maybe continued. I'm not sure if it's in every installment, but it's very reminiscent of Dream Warriors, and it's a quote by Friedrich Nietzsche that reads, "Do you know the terror of he who falls asleep? To the very toes he is terrified because the ground gives way under him, and the dream begins." So it's just, I think it looks like a blanket quote about dreams. I don't know if it really, oh, dreams are scary. I don't know if it really directly relates to the plot of this movie that much, but it then goes on. There's another quote, right, with two quotes right off the bat. The second quote is "Welcome to Prime Time, Bitch," by Freddy Krueger. So yeah, they are quoting themselves on this one. Neither of which really makes sense because we've been in prime time. These are major motion pictures. Don't really understand why they would put that quote there. I mean, just because they're like, hey, remember how funny this was? I don't know. I don't know why you would invite comparisons. Especially like after watching this movie and you're not liking it, you're like, man, remember that when they quoted a movie that was way better than this movie in the beginning? Funny. But yeah, so then the first thing you see is like a computer screen type font, and there's like a map, and it like breaks it down for you basically. That's Springwood, Ohio, 10 years from now, which like from 1991 or 10 years from the end of the last movie. I'm not sure exactly. But yeah, it basically says, and there's a quote. There's like it's like how like old computer when it reads like it's basically like Springwood, Ohio. Mysterious killings and suicides wipe out entire population of children and teenagers, and that the adults are experiencing like mass psychosis, but there is new evidence of one surviving teenager. Which I don't know. I think right off the bat, I think this concept for a Freddy movie is very, very interesting. Like, he was always wanting to kill the kids on Elm Street, through their dreams. And it started off with him, of course, just taking revenge on the Elm Street kids whose parents murdered him. But I think in later movies, especially like 5 and even 2, it like 5 and 2 especially, it like expands upon the idea of him just wanting to kill teenagers generally. So in this movie, sees him having accomplished that. In this movie, in the beginning of this movie, you see that Freddy Krueger has accomplished his goal. He has killed all the children in Springwood, Ohio, which is I don't know. I think that's such a unique idea, because a lot of these like the first literally 5 movies just explore the idea of him killing teens, but it's just like this movie posits, well, what would happen if he kills all the teens in Springwood, Ohio? What happens when he's accomplished the goal he set out to do? Like, where does he go from there? And I mean, that's the thing. It was like Freddy's doing this, and it can only end one of two ways: either you stop him, or he just continuously keeps killing kids until there's no kids left. It's like, what happens if you don't contain Michael Myers? Like, does he kill everybody? Especially if you think of Michael Myers in like the new like Halloween 2018 David Gordon Green Light, where he's just like an unstoppable killing machine and he has no rhyme or reason for why he kills. Like, why? Like, what's gonna stop him? And if he doesn't get stopped, does he just kill every single person that exists? Yeah, I just think it's a very interesting concept. But the computer printout said, which I don't know why they would choose a computer printout for this part, but the computer printout read that there was one surviving teenager still in Springwood, and then we cut to this teen, and he's on a plane flying through a storm, and you can kind of tell that this is a dream based on the interactions he's having with people. And the kid is obviously in a nightmare, and he's being tortured by Freddy. Freddy's trying to do, we're seeing Freddy in the throes of completing his mission, basically, and killing the final kid. We just jump right into the middle of it. So the plane starts to break up, and the kid's terrified because of the storm, and then he falls out of the plane. He's falling from the sky, and then but then at the last second he wakes up. And he wakes up in a house, and you're like, oh, is he still in the dream? Is this his house? But then he looks out the window, and the house is also falling from the sky. So this is still the dream. And it's like a kind of a Wizard of Oz homage. And then you see Freddy on a broomstick wearing like a witch's hat outside the window. And he's like, I'll get you, my pretty, and your little soul too. Which is, honestly, to see it on screen is pretty legit funny. It's actually, it actually did make me laugh. And I was like, oh man, Freddy's up to his old hijinks again. Right off rip, I love it. So the house, falls out of the sky, crashes onto an empty road, which then you see from a street sign is Elm Street. And the kid, he's thrown out the window and he's unharmed. Because the dream's not over. Freddy's toying with him, basically. And the boy's walking on the street, and he comes across like a ticket booth that's giving out bus tickets. And the ticket taker is actually a Bob Shea cameo. Bob Shea being like the founder of New Line Cinema and like the executive producer of this movie, and all of the Nightmare movies, and he's made cameos in a lot of them. And Bob Shea, for some reason, has Freddy's glove on, because I guess this is like a manifestation of Freddy. And he's like, here's your ticket. One ticket out of Elm Street. And then, like, the kid turns around and is immediately hit by a bus. And Freddy's a bus driver. Freddy's a bus driver for the second time in this franchise. After Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge. And Freddy, this when he hits the kid, and then you see, oh, it's Freddy. Freddy lets out like the heartiest laugh, the heartiest like ah ha ha like Freddy laugh I've ever heard in my life. It actually kind of jarred me. I was like, oh, whoa, he really put his fucking foot in that laugh. Oh, like they couldn't have dialed that down a little bit. Um, so the kid's like squashed on the windshield of the bus like a bug, and Freddy's talking to him, taunting him and stuff. And then like they approach the like leaving Springwood sign, like the border of Springwood, and then like Freddy like smashes on the brakes and like launches the kid over the border of Springwood. So I think basically, and like literally, there's like a barrier. There's like a shadow barrier over Springwood. I guess that Freddy has cast. Again, this is not very clear. I don't, because I think this movie kind of plays fast and loose with the rules, which I don't really mind. I think it's like all interesting, and and like it doesn't, like I'm not like a stickler for like the rules, but like the kid flies through this like basically like this barrier that's like basically over Springwood, and he's like launched into the next town, which is like in daytime, but even though it's like Springwood basically, and this is all part of a dream too, so but it's like Springwood is cast in darkness, and Freddy has done that, I guess. But he like launches this kid out of a barrier, and there's like a Wile E. Coyote-esque kid-shaped hole in the barrier, and of course like there's a lot of grungy 90s music playing the whole time. And like Freddy basically is just like, hey, now go fetch me more souls, because I guess he intends, by launching this kid into the next town, this kid will like inevitably bring more kids and people back to Springwood for him to like torture. So then the kid like he gets up and he starts walking to the nearest town. And we see that this kid, he takes out of his pocket a newspaper article, like a newspaper clipping that says something about a missing, like a Kruger woman still missing. So this kid has no idea what this means really. He looks at it like questioningly. He says no idea. And then also we don't know what that means. And then of course I think it'll lead to something later. So then we cut to some sort of center for like shelter for troubled youths basically, and this is where we meet the teens that we're going to follow during this movie, which is Breckenmeyer Spencer, tough boxer girl Tracy, and deaf neo-greaser Carlos, which I honestly love these teens because they're just very funny, big personalities. Like I guess it seems like Spencer, played by Breckenmeyer, he has like this little blonde ponytail, and he seems like very grungy. He's like and I guess he's like a stoner druggie who also makes pipe bombs, and he's like just like he's there because he's like rebelling and lashing out against his father. Whereas Tracy and Carlos have both like suffered some sort of abuse from their parents. But yeah, they're funny kids. I like them, despite the fact that they've been through, like, at least two of them have been through some pretty hair-raising stuff. They're big personalities, and I like these characters a lot. I think that's like another thing about the Nightmare series that I really love, is that like the teenagers, I always really like the teens. I think more than even like the Friday the 13th and even Halloween. Like the teens in these movies always have so much personality. And they're just really, these ones especially are like continue that trend. They're just like very diverse, and like just have like a lot of like quirks and traits about them. Whereas sometimes like I'm like, man, what is your identity? You're just a guy, Paul Holt from Friday 2. You're just a dude in a sweater, whatever. And there's some funny, again, these kids, like, they endear me right away because they have some good lines. Like Spencer and Carlos. Like Carlos is like roasting Spencer for not talking back to his dad, not standing up to his dad when his dad comes to visit him. And he's like, well, Carlos, why don't you ever talk back to anyone? And Carlos says, I stopped talking back when it became hazardous to my health. And he points to his ear. So I guess like I know it's like kind of making light of like some sort of abuse he obviously suffered, but it's a light way to do it, and it's kind of quippy. And then Tracy is asked by Spencer, "Oh, hey, does your dad ever come to visit?" And then Tracy says, "Every time I close my eyes." So it's like obvious that these kids have been through some stuff, but I just like the dialogue. So then we meet Yaphet Kotto, whose character is literally just named Doc because he is a doctor. You couldn't have given him like, oh, that's Dr. Young, or that's Dr. Johnson or something. They just call him Doc, and he's wearing a pretty bad wig. That's like real, like the hair comes down too far. It's real weird, and the texture looks strange. Looks like Frederick Douglass. And he's a dream doctor, like a dream therapist, who's trying to reach these troubled youths in their dreams through dream therapy, which of course doesn't actually, like, I'm like, oh, it's kind of related, but they don't do anything with that at all. But we meet Yaphet Kotto because he's having a conversation with the main therapist, head doctor there, whose name is Maggie Burroughs, and they're having a conversation, and he divulges that she has a recurring dream that is plaguing her. So, she's got some problem with dreams. Okay, and then there is a part of dialogue here which I find kind of problematic, which this Yaphet Kotto character has a poster on his wall, and Maggie is just like, what are those? And he's like, oh, those are the 3 dream demons, evil, horrible creatures who invade through nightmares, and they roam the earth looking for an individual to which they can lash onto and heighten their power, and in turn they give this individual power to invade people's dreams. So it's like, hey man, you're describing Freddy Krueger. Like, I don't know why they would do that this early. Like, they're literally, and it's so funny because they act like it's a big reveal later, and it could have been a big reveal later, but like obviously they're talking about Freddy, and this is like they're literally saying where Freddy gets his powers from. Like here, early in the movie. It's like 15 minutes into the movie. Which I don't mind this explanation for Freddy's powers, but I would have liked the reveal to be much, much later. Like, Doc, comes to Maggie at the 11th hour when they're about to face Freddy. And he's like, listen, I think Freddy gets his powers from these. But, he just talks about it now, randomly. Because he randomly has a poster of them on their wall. And it just, it only even vaguely comes back later after when they're about to kill him. I'm like, yeah, I don't know. You could have just done all this later. I don't know why you would do that now. But yeah, so it turns out John... Okay, the character of John Doe is the mystery boy from the earlier sequence. They begin calling him John Doe because they don't know his name. Because he doesn't know his name. Because he has amnesia. Because when he was thrown out of the portal, he hit his head on a rock. I forgot to mention. So John is picked up by police, and he's admitted to this troubled youth's shelter. And Maggie admits him, and John confesses to Maggie that he has no memory of anything, except the only thing he does remember is that he can't fall asleep. And then we later cut to a scene of John, which I think is funny because it's nighttime. And this is right after he says that he can't fall asleep. It's him singing, bottles of beer on the wall, that song. And he's counted up to 4,566 in attempts to stay awake. And it's annoying everyone in the shelter, but he keeps doing it because he knows he can't fall asleep. We then cut to Maggie, who is at her house, and she's dreaming. And we see this recurring dream that Yaphet Kotto mentioned, which involves someone who is obviously her father chasing her around a backyard, and then a screaming woman. And it features a water tower, which is actually also featured in a picture in the article John had in his pocket talking about the Krueger woman. In the background of a photo of the Krueger woman missing, we see this water tower, which is in Maggie's dream. So Maggie, I guess, is somehow connected to Springwood and somehow connected to this missing Krueger woman. And then through her discussions with John, she realizes that she and John are having like similar dreams about a little girl and this water tower. And then she confides in Yaphet Kotto about this. And then Yaphet Kotto begins breaking down, like, dreams and stuff with her. And it's funny, she actually says a line. She said, "What is it with all this dream talk? I'm so tired of this dream bullshit." And I'm like, well, honey, you're in the wrong movies. This is all dreams, baby. We're talking dreams here. This is Nightmare on Elm Street. But after discovering the similarities between her dreams and John's dreams, and the fact that the water tower in the picture is in her dreams as well, she decides that she needs to take John back to Springwood to figure out his identity and why he can't remember anything, but also find out stuff about himself. But then, of course, that's literally fulfilling like Freddy's prophecy that he bringing people to Springwood for him to torture. So they take this van. Oh, and also there's this like weird subplot barely mentioned about how the three teens, Spencer, Carlos, and Tracy, are going to hitch a ride in the van, and that like some custodian is going to take them to California. So they leave in the van. They take the van to Springwood, and then lo and behold, these three kids are stowed away in the back. So now all five of our main characters, I guess not Yaphet Kotto, but everyone else is now in Springwood. Even though these kids wanted to go to California to get away. Silly me, I have a note here that's like on the side. It says Lisa Zane is wearing a lot of sexy pantsuits. Which I'm sorry to say, just a quick note. Lisa Zane, very beautiful woman, very Greek-looking woman, which is dark hair, dark eyes, definitely my cup of tea. Anyway, probably a good reason why I like this movie. But so they get to Springwood and they come across a town fair, but the town fair is like depressing. There's a clown smoking a cigarette, and it's like a ghost town basically because there's no kids. And they, of course, are like, wow, this is really weird. What kind of town fair doesn't have any kids? And they run into Roseanne Barr and Tom Arnold, who are cameoing in this movie as a couple whose children have been killed. And they come up to our teens and are like, pinching their cheeks. And are like, oh my gosh, we haven't seen a child in this town forever. Can we adopt you? Do you have parents? But then Tom Arnold has to like restrain Roseanne because she's like, I want my children back. I want children so bad. And he's like, and Tom Arnold's like, they only bring him. That's when he comes is when children are here. And it's like, oh, I guess Freddy has become, so prevalent in this town to the point, unlike in every single other installment where like literally adults and everyone in the town knows about him. And I guess that's what happens when, that he kills all the children. So they split up at this point, Maggie and John, and then the three teens, with Maggie and John going to the nearby elementary school to see if they can find anything about the little girl that's in their dreams or John. And then the three jokesters, the three musketeers, as I refer to them in my notes, they steal the van and try to leave Springwood, but they're trapped. It's like one of those things, in movies, when it's like, it's like in kind of like actually in the mouth of, it's actually kind of like in the Mouth of Madness, where when people leave and they no matter which way they turn when they're driving, they just end up back in the same spot because it's like a loop basically. They do it in like that movie, The Final Girls too. It's like when you're trapped, you have to stay here. There's no escaping Springwood, which again, I don't really know how Freddy is doing this when all of these people are awake. Like, how are you making it so they can't leave Springwood? Like this movie like lends to the idea that Freddy has become something more powerful than he once was, and that he has a lot more influence during the day, and when people are not during the day, but like when people are awake, which I guess maybe is just actually lazy writing. or just them playing fast and loose, like I said, with the rules. But I think it's definitely an interesting idea. Like, now that Freddy has killed all of the children in Springwood, he is like almost like a god type figure, and he can do stuff regardless of if people are asleep or awake. And it's funny though, like, because when these kids are driving around, there's a sequence with a map which I find very funny, where Tracy and Spencer are in the front seat and Carlos is in the back, and Tracy's like, Carlos, will you read the map and tell us how to get out of here? And then he unfolds a map, and then he unfolds it again, and he just keeps unfolding it, and the map just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until it takes up the entire back of the van. And then he finally gets to like the center of the map, and written in blood is "You're fucked," and it's like really funny because and then you see this, like, Carlos wakes up and it's like obviously he fell asleep for a second, but it's just like, I love how Freddy is like not even torturing people in their dreams, he's just teasing them, he's just mocking them and making them feel stupid and foolish, and I think that's pretty funny. And it's a pretty funny sequence, and it's funny too because the effects of it is like you see Carlos unfolding a map, and it's obvious that he's just unfolding a map in a way. It's one map, and he's just unfolding it in like a way to make it look big, and then it cuts to like a different shot, like a view of him from the front seat, and you could tell it's just like they just threw like 27 maps in there, and he's buried under maps. It's just a very funny the way they do it. But yeah, I gotta say that there's a huge portion of this movie without Freddy in it. So as I've said, like, my entire last page of notes didn't have Freddy. Freddy hasn't been seen since he ejected John Doe out of Springwood. So it's been a while in this movie, maybe like 30 minutes without Freddy, which is maybe a little too long to go. But yeah, so I mean, like, this movie began and there's been no kills for like 30 minutes, which is kind of crazy. But yeah, so we cut to Lisa Zane and John Doe at the elementary school, where like, the elementary school, of course, is pretty much abandoned. There's only a few crazed teachers in there because there's no kids. And they come across a crazed teacher, and this teacher is actually, this is pretty cool, I think, pretty neat. This teacher is teaching Freddy 101, because like basically like Freddy took away his livelihood, I guess, and he's been driven insane. So now he just is like, has spent a lot of time obviously cataloging like the course of Freddy, and like the history of Freddy, and like what he's done in this town. And there's like a complete timeline of him killing kids on the chalkboard, and there's like a photo album of newspaper clippings like, oh, 10 teens dead, Kruger sought, it's Kruger again. And then we see in this photo album that there's a missing space where the newspaper article that John Doe has was obviously taken from. So John Doe, of course, I guess, was at some point at this elementary school and swiped this article. And it's revealed through this timeline, this teacher's timeline, that Freddy had a child, and that Freddy had a child taken from him in 1966. Which is funny because, like, I don't know, one of the plot points of this movie is that John Doe, after this scene, is convinced that he's Freddy's kid, because he's like, why would Freddy let me live? Why would Freddy let me go unless I'm his child? But that's the thing. This movie takes place in either 1999 or 2001, and it just said that Freddy's child was taken from him in 1966, and John Doe is playing a 16-year-old, a teenager, according to the movie. So I'm like, hey, John Doe, I don't know if you've ever been taught math or not, but if the child was a child, like maybe like 6 years old, in 1966, that would make this child like 35, 40, and you're 16. You being Freddy's child, physically impossible. But again, I think that like the movie wants you to think that like John is Freddy's child. So the fact that like they're doing that, but then also literally giving us a date in which Freddy's child was taken, doesn't really make any sense at all. So again, I think the writing of this movie is kind of maybe even a little lazy at times, because it's just like, I think a big plot point of this movie is like, oh, John Doe is Freddy's child. And okay, yeah, spoiler alert, John Doe is not Freddy's child. It's someone else in the movie. But like, they really try to convince us it was John Doe. But John Doe's playing a teenager according to them. So it's like, yeah, I don't really know. But yeah, so we cut back to the other three jokesters, and they've been driving around all day and simply can't get out of Springwood. And it's nighttime now, so they're like, well, let's just stop, rest for a while. And the kids end up on Elm Street. And there's this funny sequence where they find this abandoned house, and they go in this abandoned house to sleep for the night. And then as soon as they enter the house, the outside of the house like morphs and changes, and it's actually a pretty cool sequence with like decent effects. I don't know if they did it using like maybe a model or something, but like but the house like transforms into Nancy Thompson's old house from like the first movie, like 1428 Elm Street. And yeah, I don't like the house transformation is really cool, like really, I keep saying cool looking, but it's really well done, like a steak. But like it's not necessary, because these kids aren't going to avoid this house because they've never been to Springwood before, and they're not going to be like, whoa, that's Nancy Thompson's old house, we can't go in there. You don't need to trick them to go into this house. They would have went into it anyway. They would have went into any abandoned house because these kids have never been here before, and they don't know the legend of Freddy or what Freddy's done here. So like you don't need to do this. Also, again, all these kids are awake, so like how is Freddy disguising this house if these kids are awake? So yeah, these kids go in this house, and Carlos goes upstairs because he needs to sleep. He's very tired, and he finds a big comfy bed, and he falls asleep. And he in his dream, he ends up in his old like slum apartments from wherever he used to live, where he's confronted by his mother, and his mother is like berating him, and he's obviously very terrified. And it's hinted at that Carlos's mother was the one who abused him to the point where he was deafened. And then his mother turns into Freddy, and Freddy shoves a giant Q-tip into his ear, so deep that it comes out the other side. And Carlos is like screaming and screaming and screaming. And then Carlos takes the Q-tip out of his ear, but Freddy's like, Carlos, lend me your ear, which is a pretty good line. And then he cuts off Carlos's ear with the hearing aid on it, so Carlos can't hear. And then the sound in the movie is heard through Carlos's point of view for the next little bit, and it's all muffled, and it's very cool. And you're seeing Carlos wander around, not being able to hear anything. We also can't really hear anything, so I thought that was pretty neat. So Carlos is stumbling around, and Freddy is like trailing right behind him and like doing a lot of stuff, but Carlos can't tell because Carlos can't hear him. And then eventually Carlos confronts Freddy again, and Freddy drops Carlos's hearing aid, and Carlos is like, oh, thank God. And he grabs his hearing aid, puts it on his other ear, but then the hearing aid, because it's been Freddy-fied, like mutates Carlos's ear. And it looks like the hearing aid grows like a bunch of weird claws, and it punctures and grips into Carlos's ear. And it looks pretty gross. And now Carlos' hearing is like jacked all the way up, and Carlos can hear everything, and he hears too intensely to the point where like a dripping faucet from across the room makes Carlos like cry out in pain. So then Freddy appears next to Carlos, and he takes out a chalkboard, and then with his claws he scratches it like over and over and over again, until Carlos's head starts to like pulsate and grow, until Freddy does it so intensely that Carlos's head explodes. Spoiler alert: this is my best kill of the movie. I just think it's very inventive and creative, and I think very reminiscent of like the old nightmare movies where like, you know, Freddy takes like a trait or like an interest of yours and like uses it to kill you basically. But then we cut back to the house that the kids are staying in, and they go in Carlos's room, and Carlos's body isn't there, which is like something that also confused me, because like again, it's kind of like in a way that I guess I am kind of a stickler for, because I just don't understand it, because it serves no like functional purpose for the plot, like because like they go back to Carlos's room and Carlos's body is gone. But like if Carlos had died in his sleep, his body would still be there, but just with like an exploded head. But for some reason his body's gone, and I don't really know like what they gained from, like maybe okay, I guess it keeps the kids like not scared and unaware of what's going on if they don't have Carlos's body. But again, it does like really break the rules in a kind of an egregious way, because Carlos, like if he died in his dream, even if Freddy got his soul, his body would still be there. So then we cut to Spencer, who basically does the exact same thing as Carlos, but he falls asleep on the couch after getting high. But it's cool though, because at the beginning of Spencer's dream, he's like sitting on the couch smoking pot, and he's watching TV, and then it's like he's watching a music video with all these people in it, and then Carlos, like I guess Carlos's soul is like trying to communicate with him, and he like cuts through the crowd, and he's like, Spencer, you gotta wake up, but then he's like enveloped by the crowd, and then Spencer's dream begins. And then you see it's like Spencer, he's continuing to watch TV, and then we see the Johnny Depp cameo, which Johnny Depp was in the first Nightmare on Elm Street movie, and I guess he was doing New Line Cinema a favor by coming in this movie. And you know, Spencer's like the stoner, so we see Johnny Depp do like a drug PCA, where he's just like, this is your brain, and he holds up an egg, and then he cracks it, and he's like, this is your egg on drugs. And then Freddy comes in and he hits him with a frying pan, and then he's like, no man, drugs are cool. And then he like plays like this really like high-esque type like stoner music, and then he makes like all like the TV and then the lights in the room go all like psychedelic. And I guess he's like just like lulling Spencer into like a full sense of security or something. This, I gotta say, this Spencer kill, it's like maybe like the low point in the movie for me, because he jumps from this like, oh, psychedelic high, like, because like I said, Freddy uses people's like traits and attributes to kill him. So like Spencer really likes video games, and he really likes like getting stoned. So Freddy uses all this like stone stuff, but then he like sucks Spencer into the TV, into a video game, which I don't know why they just didn't do that to begin with, because I think the video game stuff works better than like the high stone stuff, which doesn't even really go anywhere. So it's like Spencer is in the TV, and he's in a video game, and he's battling like cartoon versions of his dad, who are like, be like me, and he has to like fight them. But Freddy is like controlling Spencer. And Freddy has a couple throwaway lines like, oh, now I'm playing with power and great graphics. And I don't mind this stuff. I think it's like just Freddy being Freddy, but I'm like, ooh man. It's not a very appealing kill, I don't think. But again, I do like how in the waking world, Spencer's body is mimicking like what he's doing in the dream world. So like he's walking and jumping over stuff, and he's like banging against walls, and he's like jumping through brick walls and stuff, because that's what he's doing in the video game. That's what he's doing in his dream. So this is like a good example of them actually like following the dream rules. So then like Maggie and John have returned to the house at this point. How they found them, I don't really know. But then John and Tracy are like, he's dreaming, we have to go into his dream to help him. So then John is like, come on, Tracy, knock me out, Tracy. So Tracy hits him with a board, and then like John flies back into a table, but then as soon as he hits the table, his body disappears. Like, I don't understand this body work. If John is just dreaming, why is his whole physical body in the dream? That doesn't make any sense. And they keep doing that kind of stuff, which I guess, I'm sorry, does bother me, because it's just like it's like bending the rules, but like for no reason. Other than like, oh, a cool special effect where when he's like, you know, punched through the table, he doesn't come out the bottom side of the table. It doesn't matter. But yeah, so Tracy, after knocking out John, enters the dream world through meditation, apparently being taught by Doc. So I'm like, number one, I'm thinking, are you guys dream warriors? This is like the exact dream warrior thing. How are you guys in Spencer's dream, unless you guys are literally like Kirsten from part 3 in your dream warriors, which I don't know, I thought was cool. I guess it wasn't really spoken on, but I'm like, oh, these are kind of like new dream warriors. The fact that they're like going into each other's dreams and stuff, and the fact that Tracy like meditates into a dream, I'm like, Tracy's like the ultimate dream warrior, I guess. But yeah, Tracy destroys Freddy's controller, video game controller. But of course, Freddy then, you know, flexes his glove, and he's like, well, guess what, buddy? I got the power glove. Which, like, I think at that point, Nintendo had like released something called a power glove, and there's like a bunch of buttons and joysticks and stuff on the glove. Which is like funny, I guess. I think if I had seen it in 1991, I probably would be like, whoa, the power glove. But yeah. But yeah, so Freddy, using the power glove, kills Spencer in the game by throwing him, because he's been controlling Spencer's character at this point, like the Avatar. So he throws Spencer's body off a cliff in the game, and in the real world, Spencer's body is thrown down a bunch of stairs. And then at the bottom of the stairs, a portal opens up, and then like to hell, and then Spencer is like sucked into it. So again, Freddy's powers are all over the place. He's taking physical bodies as well as souls, I guess. But it's cool though, because Freddy takes his soul, and then it cuts to the TV that Spencer was watching, and the TV just like starts to bleed out the screen, which I thought that was pretty effective. But Tracy, like, you know, quits meditating, and then she's awake. But John is still asleep, and then, you know, Freddy starts torturing John, and John finds himself in that same house from earlier. And like he knows he's in a dream. This is a funny line. He says, he's like, you know, nothing's gonna make me get off this bed. I'm not getting off this bed because I know if I do, Freddy's gonna fuck with me some more. And then Freddy like sets the bed on fire. Like he's like, I'm not gonna get off this bed. And he crosses his arms, but then the bed is immediately on fire, and then the whole room is on fire, which causes John to jump out of the window to safety. But even though when John looked out the window a few seconds ago, it was like there was nothing but grass on the outside, he looks out now, and then there's nothing. Like the house is like in the sky. So John is again falling through the air after jumping out the window, but he has a parachute, and he pulls the parachute. And he's like safely gonna land, but then he looks up inside the parachute, and Freddy's there, and Freddy like shimmies down the parachute like wires, and then he's about to cut. He cuts one. He's about to cut the other one, and John's like, "Wait, no, you're my kid. Or I'm your kid. You wouldn't do that to me." And then Freddy basically is just like, "You're not my kid, bro. I don't know why you would think that. I kept you alive so you would bring me new victims, and you have. And I kept you alive so you would bring me back my daughter, so thank you." And then he cuts the other parachute strap, and then John begins plummeting to the earth. And then we cut to Freddy down on the ground, and again, like a Bugs Bunny cartoon, he wheels out a bed of spikes, which John's dream body falls on, and then John is killed. So it's kind of a good fake, though, because I think like the movie presents like John as the protagonist. But then, like here, halfway through the movie, he's killed. So, like, I don't know about you, the audience, but I, as a viewer, was not for 1 second ever thinking that John was Freddy's child. But I did think he was, like, the main character. So I was surprised to see him die initially. And then John's real body dies, and then disappears in like a glowing light again, because Freddy's taken physical forms in this one. But then Freddy somehow turns into like a weird beam of light smoke and then goes into Maggie's brain. So in order for him to leave Springwood. So Maggie, seemingly fine, but with Freddy like in her unconscious, in spirit, she gets in the car with John's body and Tracy, or not John's body because John's body's gone, with Tracy, and then they drive out of Springwood, and then like the wall, like the not really physical dream wall or whatever, the barrier turns to glass and it shatters. So it means like that Freddy is free basically. So then back at the youth's shelter, Mr. Kelly, who was briefly in like the shelter scene in the beginning, is talking to Maggie, and he doesn't remember who Carlos or Spencer or John were. I guess literally like their Freddy, when he takes their physical form and their soul, like erases them from history, which again is kind of a new thing. But of course Yaphet Kotto remembers, because Yaphet Kotto can control his dreams. I don't know. But John actually did manage to tell Maggie before he died that Freddy's child was a daughter. So Maggie, connecting the dots at this point, that night goes to her mother's house and finds the adoption papers that indicate that she was adopted and that she is actually Freddy's child, and that her initial name was Catherine Kruger. And then through Maggie's dream later that night, we find out that Freddy was Maggie's dad, indeed, and that Freddy killed her mom when, sorry, ice cream truck is really loud outside the window. Didn't know those things still existed. Gonna just pause for a second, hope that goes away. Sorry about that, crazy. Ice cream trucks. Anyway, but yeah, so we find out that Freddy actually killed Maggie / Catherine's mom in front of her when she was young. After the mom, Loretta, found out that Freddy was killing kids, because I guess she discovered his basement lair, which she told her to never go to. So Maggie sees Freddy choke the life out of her mom. And that's like the missing Kruger woman that was in the article, was Catherine's mom. And Freddy appears to her, and he explains that that's why Freddy started killing the Elm Street kids. Because they took away his child. And that's why he started killing... Yeah, sorry. Which I'm now discovering is kind of a hole and doesn't make any sense, actually. Because, he's like, they took away my child, so I started killing their children. And okay, so maybe that's why he started killing specifically Elm Street kids? But, he was already killing kids, which is what the mom discovered when she went in his lair. And then he's like, that's when I started killing kids. I'm like, but you were obviously already killing kids, because that's what your wife discovered. But anyway, but yeah, so we see that, we see Freddy say that he's like, oh, I started killing kids then, and now I'll begin anew with the shelter, and I will begin terrorizing this town just like I terrorized the last town. And every town has an Elm Street, and then an Elm Street sign rises up out of the ground right next to the shelter, which I thought was pretty cool. But yeah, and we also see flashbacks of Freddy from when he was a kid, and how he was bullied, and how he was abused by his stepdad, or how he was abused by his father, portrayed by what's his name, Alice Cooper, which is kind of cool. But yeah, so we then cut to Tracy, who's also asleep and dreaming, and Freddy appears to her as her abusive stepdad, who she then beats. Well, Tracy's actually one of the coolest characters in this movie, I think, because she sees her stepdad, and she reclaims her honor, and doesn't not redeems herself, but completes her arc basically. because she confronts her evil stepdad who sexually abused her, I guess, when she was a child, and she beats him up really bad using kitchen utensils. And then the stepdad turns to Freddy, but then even if it's Freddy, she's still dismantling this dude. She beats the shit out of Freddy using karate. And Tracy says, she's like, this is my dream and I do what I want. And that's why I'm able to beat you up like this. And I'm like, oh man, Tracy is a dream warrior. That's real. So then we see Yaphet Kotto's dream. And Yaphet Kotto, I gotta say, he's wearing some sick-ass pleated pants. I miss pleated pants, dude. Those were such a thing in the 90s. They look so good. I love it. And he's confronted by Freddy. And there's actually this really cool scene where Freddy counts off the ways they've tried to kill him. And like while he does it, he's like counting on his fingers, but instead of like just tapping on his fingers, rapping on them, he cuts them off. He said, oh, they've tried to kill me many ways by burning, and he chops off his index finger. Burying, chops off his middle finger. Holy water, chops off his ring finger, which is hilarious. And he goes on to say, he's like, oh, I just keep on ticking because that's what they told me. And Yaphet Kotto's like, who? And Freddy's like, oh, the dream people. In dreams, because of their power, I am forever. And I don't know why he's like dropping all this on Yaphet Kotto. Maybe because he knows Yaphet Kotto knows about dreams or something. But we then see Yaphet Kotto. He rips off a piece of Freddy's sweater in the dream. And then he's woken up by alarms that he set because Yaphet Kotto is hip. And he knows what's going on. So they basically, like Yaphet Kotto's like, look, I grabbed his sweater out from the dream. If we take him out of the dream with us, he becomes mortal and we can beat him. And I'm like, oh, isn't this just the same plot? Isn't this the exact same plan as part one that didn't work? But that's what they're going to do. And it's going to somehow work this time. Oh, man. And then there's like, okay, so then there's this weird part with the 3D glasses where Yaphet Kotto gives Lisa Zane 3D glasses to put on, and he's just like, use these to okay, I'll be honest with you, I don't really know what the 3D glasses do. It's like if she's wearing them and she can see them, then you're awake, but like in the I don't know, they give her some sort of secret powers, like ability to enter Freddy's mind or something. I don't really know. But yeah, they put Maggie underneath, hoping she can bring out Freddy. And it's actually a pretty cool sequence because Yaphet Kotto's poster of like the 3 dream demons surrounding like this ancient brick stone gate actually kind of opens up wider and becomes a portal. And then Maggie goes through it, and she enters like Freddy's mind, and it's like full of rotting, like swollen neurons. And then the dream demons are there, just swimming around, not sure why they're like hanging out in Freddy's brain. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. And this is where she enters Freddy's memories, and this is where she sees him being bullied as a child, and him murder a hamster, and him being beaten by Alice Cooper. And also, I have to admit, not even admit because I don't have trouble saying it, the guy who plays young Freddy Krueger, who's getting abused by Alice Cooper, is played by, I think his name's Toby Sexton. He's really good, and he's really scary because he portrays like a Freddy Krueger that like is like a masochist, and he like is like relishing in the fact that his father is beating him. It's really creepy. But then then we see the memory of Fred Krueger being chased down and almost burned alive by the parents. And then, the dream demons coming to him, be like, hey, if you agree to be our dream champion, we'll save you from death right now. And he's like, yup. So it's cool, I don't know, getting to see so much of Robert Englund just playing Fred Krueger without makeup. I thought that's kind of cool. And then we see Freddy kill Maggie's mom, and then Maggie's confronted by Freddy, and then they duel, they fight, they have like a little session where they're like throwing each other around, but then Maggie grabs Freddy, and then Yaphet Kotto and Tracy wake her up, And then, you know, even though she's like grabbed Freddy and they come out, Freddy's not there and they don't think it worked, but then they first, like, because the 3D glasses are still on Lisa Zane, they're like, oh, it worked, he's here somewhere. I don't get it. But also, like, I don't understand, like, I think this was how it was in part 1 too. Like, when Freddy's brought out, like, he's brought out, like, literally Lisa Zane is like, has like this guy in a bear hug. But then when they wake up, Freddy's nowhere to be found. I'm like, where is this guy? And then, like, it's so funny because after Maggie wakes up, they're like, okay, let's go get weapons. And they go to, like, the area where they take all the confiscated weapons from, like, the troubled youths. And, like, oh, there's, like, Breckenmeyer's pipe bomb. And there's a bunch of stuff. There's a baseball bat with nails sticking out of it. There's ninja stars. And again, like, if Maggie had managed to pull Freddy out and Freddy had been, like, right there with you guys, like, why would you not have grabbed the weapons already? If Freddy had just been right there, he would have killed every single one of you, and you guys would have had no way to defend yourselves. But I digress. So then Lisa Zane is, like, in these guys, and, like, Lisa Zane gets, they find Freddy. Freddy confronts him, and he locks Yaphet Kotto and Tracy outside of a room, and then he and Lisa Zane duel, and Lisa Zane, like, hits him in the face with the bat with the nails in it, and knocks his glove off his hand, kind of like neutering him, basically. And they struggle for the glove. She breaks his fingers and then pins him to the wall with a bunch of knives and throwing stars. And then there's this, like, scene where she puts on the glove and Freddy's like, oh yes, do you like it? Do you like it? Come over to the dark side or whatever. And I'm like, come on, dude, you really think that's gonna work? And she takes the glove and, like, stabs him with it, like, upward, like, up underneath the ribs, and creates, like, this gaping hole in his chest, which I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool, actually. Freddy being stabbed with his own glove is something that we haven't really seen before. I think we kind of saw it in part 3, but and then they shove the Breckenmeyer's pipe bomb in his chest. And then right before Freddy explodes, he's like, ugh, kids. And then he explodes, releasing the dream demons and therefore ending Freddy's reign forever. Even though, of course, this is exactly what they did in the first one, so I'm not sure why it didn't work then. So then we see, like, Lisa Zane and Yaphet Kotto and Tracy. They're outside. They're, like, you know, outside the weapons room, and they're, like, all happy, and they're, like, relishing their victory, and they're rejoicing. And Maggie triumphantly is just like, Freddy's dead. And then the movie ends. Very abrupt. She literally is like, Freddy's dead. Like, pretty on the nose. And I love that line. I love the way she delivers it, like, with, like, a sly smile on her face. I think that's great. But yeah, so the movie ends just like that, pretty abruptly. And then over the credits, we see, like, Freddy's greatest hits play out. And then there's, like, the song where it's like, oh, you really think Freddy's dead? And then, like, you see a bunch of scenes of him killing people and all of his pranks. I call them pranks, but he's, like, murdering people. Turning into a giant snake and eating people, and his bones are killing people. And it's just, like, I don't know. I always watch the entirety of that greatest hits just because I'm like, man, remember these other even better movies? Not that I don't like this movie, of course. And it does feature kills from this movie. But yeah, so that's the movie. Total kill count is only 3 in this one, which is actually pretty low, especially when you compare it to some of the other ones, even though part 5 only had 3 kills as well. So I guess if we go through, like, the usual ending stuff, the best scene I would say is Carlos's death. I think that's, like, easily the best death in the film. Just because I think it's, like, I think it's very original, and I think it's a very Freddy-esque kill, and I think it's definitely, like, the highlight of this movie, and it's definitely what I always think of whenever I think of this movie. I'm like, oh yeah, that deaf Neo Greaser guy gets his head exploded because of the sound. But then also, like, the beginning John Doe sequence with the house rolling from the sky, I think is really inventive and creative too. Best performance, I would actually have to say, is Leslie Dean as Tracy. I think Tracy's character is really, really interesting. And I think she actually kind of gets, like, a full arc where she's like a troubled youth, victim of sexual and physical abuse from her father, but then like in the dream she gets to like defeat her father and then defeat Freddy, and she has like got a lot of good lines, and like she doesn't die even though she's not really the final girl. So I think, and also she's just pretty, like I believe her as like a tough boxer chick. All right, so I guess we'll go to improvements. What I would improve about this movie is I would definitely improve. I would definitely just like rework Spencer's death, like the video game death. I don't think it's a bad concept for a death, because like, you know, Freddy takes things that like people like and like uses it against them to kill them. So like using video games is cool. Maybe do it in a better way, like a more like visually appealing, kind of maybe even grosser, more violent way. Like literally, he just like falls down some stairs into a big pit. And then also like the stuff before the video game stuff, where he gets halfway into like using the stoner aspect of his personality to kill him, but then just kind of switches to video games, and it seems like it wasn't really fully worked out. Maybe just add more kills. Maybe add like, I don't know, like maybe like add one more teenager in that trio to get killed in a way. Or maybe like once Freddy actually breaks into like the new town with the shelter, maybe have him start wreaking havoc and killing a few kids, because like he gets like, it seems like he's like, oh, finally I'm in this other town, every town has an Elm Street, and I'm gonna start killing again, in earnest. And then he just like doesn't at all, and we don't even get to see that happen one bit. So maybe just like let him kill a couple of the kids in the shelter or something. And maybe we could have met them earlier, and they're like, oh, here, this guy loves basketball, and then like have a basketball themed death or something. I don't know, that's just me saying a bad idea, but you know. I guess I would just narrow down, explain Freddy's rules, and even like, I don't know, he's doing a lot of stuff in this movie that he's never done before, and maybe it's because he's reached like new heights of power or something, but maybe just even say that, explain it. I don't know, like if you were to be like, oh yeah, Freddy's affecting the real world and not just dreams now because he's reached new heights of power, I'd be like, oh, okay. But he's just doing a lot of stuff that like he's never done before, like affecting the real world, and also like taking physical bodies that I didn't really understand. Also, the Freddy makeup in this one was really bad. And like, I mean, I'm sure there's probably a lot of factors for that. I bet Robert Englund was super happy about not having to be in the makeup chair as long. I bet doing not as much makeup saves them a lot of money. But yeah, I mean, like the makeup in this one is like very bad, and like it's like a really like a steep, like how the mighty have fallen from like the way it looked in the first like 2, and even like 3 and 4. The makeup looked like great. But there's like I said, you know, with all that being said, there's lots to love about this movie. Like the dialogue, I think, is actually really good. I think like the actual like story events as they're written, and a lot of them don't make a lot of sense, but I think all the interactions make a lot of sense, and there's like a lot of good like witty quips, I think, especially between the teens, and like between like Lisa Zane and like Yaphet Kotto. Like the way the characters are all interacting with each other, I think, is like a high point, and it's really like believable and real seeming. And there's definitely like inventive and original script ideas. Like I like the idea of Freddy having killed all the children at Elm Street and creating like an Elm Street and Springwood wasteland, and wanting to like get out into other like cities and do the same thing, and like every town has an Elm Street, and like how he's starting with the shelter, and just like the fact that adults know about Freddy and are like afraid of him, and like the fact that Freddy is like influencing the outside world because he's become so powerful is cool. But I wish they would have addressed it. And like even the fact that like Freddy gets his power from dream demons, I don't even mind that explanation at all. Because I don't know, as far as explanations go, I always like it when they try to, personally. And that one's not even that bad. A great cast. Lisa Zane is great. Yaphet Kotto is good. The teens are terrific. And like I said, watching them interact is great. The flashback stuff is awesome. Like seeing Robert Englund like just play like a Robert Englund looking guy and like kill his wife and interact with his daughter is good. Seeing that guy play a young Freddy and being beaten by Alice Cooper is pretty good. It's the sequence where Freddy agrees to do the Dream Demon's bidding. Awesome. Love the flashback stuff. The special effects aside, like the house transforming, the house is like falling from the sky, Carlos's head explosion, all those look great. And then of course Robert Englund as Freddy is terrific as ever. He's quippy. He's doesn't have as much like to do kill wise in this movie. I think they could I think they could have given him some more kills, but he's always terrific to watch. But yeah, final thoughts. I think this movie is just like really, really fun. It's definitely like a movie that is like not structurally sound, but I think I'm having a good enough time watching it where I don't really care. And it's only when I like try to analyze it like this that I really am like you know. But it's just like I don't know, if you just let yourself get caught up in it. Excuse me. I think it's just very fun to watch. I think it's a good time. Like I'm like a lot of stuff I'm like, oh man, that's crazy. Or a lot of stuff I'm like legitimately laughing at. And yeah, I think it's just a worthy sequel. Like if you're gonna watch all these movies, you might as well just cap it off with this one, because it's no worse than the previous one. And I think it's got some high concept stuff they're working with, which I think is pretty cool. So just lastly, I'll do some finishing stuff here, like I like to do when we do the slashers. You can't rank the Freddy actors because there's only really been two, and everybody universally prefers Robert Englund over Jackie Earle Haley, even though of course Jackie Earle Haley is like probably like the diamond in the rough that is that movie. I think of course like Robert Englund is Freddy, and there's no need to even go through website rankings. I did watch a couple videos ranking Freddy's makeup effects, and yeah, this one ranks very low. Freddy 5 and 6 looks like dull and matte and like rubbery, almost like they bought like a Freddy Krueger mask in a Halloween store and then just glued it to Robert Englund's face. And that being said, it's still better than the remake, which is like half CGI and it looks terrible, and that's the most hated. But people still don't like this very much either. It literally looks like Freddy's burns that he suffered from the first one, which are like slimy and like just nasty and like very real looking. Look like they're almost healing, which is why I think people don't really care for this one. Oh, I totally forgot to do trivia. I'll do trivia right after this next part. This next part being the ranking of the Freddy films. So I again found some articles that rank the Nightmare on Elm Street movies from worst to best, just so we can get a frame of reference for what people think of this one. And this movie actually ranked higher in some instances than I would have thought, but in others kind of just like it's like definitely bottom. It's like definitely towards the bottom and like the middle bottom. You know what I mean? So like and like I'll go through my personal rankings right now. Just to start it off, like this film comes in 6th in my personal ratings of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. And of course, with that being said, as you know, I really, really like pretty much all of these movies. So like, just because this one comes in 6th doesn't mean it's a movie that I don't really like. It's just it means that there's a lot of great installments in this franchise. So I'll go ahead and just go worst to best, worst to first. With my worst being, of course, the remake, 2010, which again I watched. I'm saying that with pretty fresh eyes, because I watched it like 2 weeks ago. It's really not good for the reasons that I said before. Definitely very forgettable, except for Jackie Earle Haley. Like especially like the teens in that movie are also emo and like depressing, and like not likable. That I'm like, oh, I'm like rooting for Jackie Earle Haley, even though he's like the creepiest, most not rootable for Freddy. So yeah, at number 9, that's gonna be the remake. Number 8, according to me, Wes Craven's New Nightmare. And again, this is like literally 1 through 8 I really love, 9 I don't love, because this movie I like. Wes Craven's New Nightmare is like inventive, it's creative. I mean, it's like with the meta aspects, to see like Robert Englund play Robert Englund, Heather Langenkamp play Heather Langenkamp, but also as she morphs into Nancy. And like the new Freddy makeup I really loved in that movie, and like the new Freddy portrayal. But again, that one's a little low on kills and it's a little slow. But again, still pretty good. Then would be Nightmare on Elm Street: The Dream Child, which I like just a little bit less than this movie. I think the kills in that movie are like much more unique and like Freddy-esque, where they're like, like I've said a million times, he's using the traits of the people to kill them. That has a likable group of teenagers. It has Alice from Part 4 in it, and just some really cool body horror stuff too is good. I like that one. Then Freddy's Dead, of course, followed by Freddy v. Jason at number 5. Part 4, The Dream Master at number 4. Freddy's Revenge at number 3. Dream Warriors at number 2, and then of course the original at number 1. And the original being number 1 is pretty much universal, I think. Especially, I'll take you through some of these articles. Like I said, the first one I looked at was Collider, which Collider ranked Freddy's Dead at number 6, with the last being Nightmare on Elm Street remake, and then the first being the original. So I think in the top, Dream Warriors, the original, Part 4 are usually in the top. And then, according to Collider, Freddy's Dead: The Final Nightmare beat out Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge, The Dream Child, and the remake. But then if we look at themarysue.com, again, Nightmare on Elm Street 1984 comes in first. But then Freddy's Dead is in 6th. People rank Wes Craven's New Nightmare pretty high too, as they should. But yeah, so in this article, according to the Mary Sue, Freddy's Dead comes in 6th, beating Freddy vs. Jason, which I think is a low ball for Freddy v. Jason, The Dream Child, and Nightmare on Elm Street, the remake. Nightmare on Elm Street remake is, I think, the last one on every single one of these. Okay, so according to Screen Rant, Freddy's Dead comes in actually at this one in number 8. Saying that Freddy's Dead features no scare, nor does it contain any true attempts to frighten the audience. Instead, the show takes blatant inspiration from the work of David Lynch, making it feel less like a Krueger film and more like a particularly silly episode of Twin Peaks. So yeah, this according to Screen Rant, this one is not one of the better ones. And then I think same thing with Slash Film. Oh no, Slash Film rated this one number 6 as well, with the remake coming in last, of course. And then this one beat Part 2 and then Part 5. So I think Part 2, Part 5, and the remake, as well as this one, are the ones that fans hate. And then Freddy VJ, Part 5, or no, Part 4, Part 3, and Part 1, and then Wes Craven's New Nightmare are the ones people like. And then, yeah, according to the Nerdist also did not care for this one. They voted this one number 8, right before the remake. Sorry, I'm just clicking on too many things. But yeah, so this one, like I said, rated towards the bottom most of the time. Okay, so I just to finish it up, I guess we'll go through some trivia that I found online. Just interesting, little facts, tidbits about the movie and the making of. This is the first Nightmare on Elm Street movie not to include the little girls jumping rope, singing Freddy's rhyme. 1, 2, Freddy's coming for you. 3, 4, better lock your door. Yada yada. Even though there is a little girl in a white dress, it's Maggie, in flashbacks, and the rhyme is depicted being written throughout various parts of Springwood. It's not sung, so that's the first time in the franchise for that. Interestingly, I found this actually really interesting. Peter Jackson's original screenplay for Freddy's Dead saw Freddy aging and growing weak within the dream world. The teens of Springwood would have drug-fueled summer parties for kicks and enter the world to beat him up. So I think that's a really, really, again, kind of just like this one, I think it's like taking the mythos of Freddy that they've kind of established as through the first five, and kind of altering it either one way or the other. In Peter Jackson's version, Freddy would have become like weak and like feeble and basically impotent, whereas in this one he's basically like all powerful, so it's kind of the reversal. But yeah, both like definitely interesting routes to have gone, and I'm not sure why they didn't end up going with that. I would have liked to see that movie. This is New Line Cinema's first film in 3D, because like the last like 15 minutes, once she puts on the 3D glasses, you're supposed to too, and they're in 3D. According to Alice Cooper, in That Night That Never Asleep Again, Elm Street Legacy documentary I mentioned earlier, he only agreed to be in the film if he could play Freddy's father without his usual Alice Cooper makeup. So because they were like, yeah, you can just look like a real person. He said, oh, that's cool, but I'll do it. Also, I guess he was like just a huge fan of the series anyway. I guess John Doe, played by Sean Greenblatt, was supposed to be Jacob from the previous film, which is Alice's daughter, Alice the Dream Master's, her son. What am I doing? But like I guess in the script it was made intentionally vague when they couldn't secure the return of Lisa Wilcox, who played Alice. I guess in an earlier version of the script, Freddy absorbed the entire town of Springwood into a dream world before moving on to the next town, with the dream police chasing after him. So like I think the idea of the Freddy absorbing the entire town into a dream world is cool. I think dream police, no matter what you would have done with that, is pretty lame. Yeah, I guess a 16-year-old Jacob Johnson, son of Alice, was supposed to be like the main character in the original script for this movie, written by Michael Almereyda. And in this first draft, Alice, now in her 30s, would be killed by Freddy, and then Taryn, Joey, and Kincaid from Dream Warriors, Nightmare on Elm Street 3 Dream Warriors, would return as the Dream Police. Taryn was like a cop that used blades, Joey was the sound cop, and Kincaid was the power cop. But I guess Rachel Talalay greatly disliked this original script, and had Michael DeLuca come in to, quote, save the day, even though I don't know if DeLuca's finished script was really that much better. This is the first Nightmare on Elm Street movie not to end on a cliffhanger, because usually there's like one last scare that happens or something that alludes to Freddy still being alive, but this one doesn't have that, because it originally really was supposed to be the ending of the franchise, because New Line Cinema had like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles at this time, and they were producing a lot of other stuff, and they kind of wanted to move on. I guess when Freddy punches Tracy in the face during their epic fight at the end, Robert Englund actually really did punch Leslie Dean, which is interesting and kind of awful. John Doe, played by Sean Greenblatt, died, I guess, before his identity could be discovered. So I guess we never really figure out who that guy is. And I guess the fact that it could have been Alice's son, Jacob Johnson, was kind of left as just being alluded to. Even though, of course, that child was born at the end of the last movie, and this movie is 10 years from that, so then that kid would have been 10 and not 16 like John Doe is in this movie. Yeah, this is a bananas one. I guess this movie led actress Leslie Dean, who played Tracy, to realize she had repressed memories of molestation. And I'm really sorry that I kind of flubbed that line, because it's really serious and pretty terrible, I guess, that she realized she had repressed memories of molestation while working on this movie. Just a crazy fact. Not good, definitely bad, but I'm sorry for her. Hopefully she got the help she needed to deal with that. I guess in that same documentary, Never Sleep Again, Lisa Zane revealed she wrote and performed a James Bond-esque end credits ballad similar to Tuesday Night's opening theme Nightmare in part 4 of the series titled The Worst Is Over, but I guess this went unused. I wonder if we can find that anywhere. That'd be interesting. Ricky Dean Logan, the actor who played Carlos, which was originally cast as John Doe. And I guess the role of Carlos simply spoke to him more, and that was the one which he lobbied for. And then Sean Greenblatt eventually got the part of John Doe. Leslie Dean, who I guess realized she was molested on the set of this movie, actually played a character in an episode of Freddy's Nightmares called Cabin Fever, which I don't know, I've never seen Freddy's Nightmares. I'd be interested to watch it. This was the 4th highest grossing film in the franchise. Leslie Dean. A lot of Leslie Dean facts. Because, of course, she's one of the most interesting people in this movie, actress and character-wise. She was actually 26 when this movie was filmed, even though she was playing a teenager. Which I guess, I don't know, that's kind of how that goes, right? They never actually cast teens to play these teens. Leslie Dean again said that in an interview that working with Roseanne and Tom Arnold was a blast, and that they were the, quote, nicest and most down-to-earth people, and that she said that she saw them on the phone trying to get an abused girl help and get her out of a horrible situation. So, interesting. Lisa Zane is the sister of Billy Zane, who was like in Back to the Future and Titanic. Leslie Dean and Johnny Depp both appeared on 21 Jump Street. This is the only film in the franchise in which Freddy doesn't kill anyone using his glove, although he does get skewered with the glove himself. Oh, I thought this is probably my favorite bit of trivia. I guess Robert Englund's favorite kill in any of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies is Carlos's death here where his head explodes. So I guess that's Robert Englund who plays Freddy Krueger's favorite death, which is neat. Also, it's one of my favorites too, I think. So, nice. I guess in that original script that featured Alice's son Jacob was supposed to have been killed 2/3 into the film, leaving his girlfriend to take the reins, which would have been like a shocking twist to throw off the audience. And I guess this was kind of saved from that, which is why we think John is the main character. But then his psychiatrist becomes like the final girl after his unexpected demise. The only Nightmare movie in which no female characters die. All the victims in this movie are male, which is cool. So even though this movie is said to take place 10 years from now, the official Nightmare on Elm Street website's timeline opts for this movie to take place in 1999, 10 years from the release of the last one, not 10 years from the release in 1991, making it 2001. So this movie, I guess, is in the canon takes place in 1999. And lastly, the producers, I guess, had planned a spin-off film in which Freddy Krueger's spirit possesses the body of his daughter, Maggie, and she continues her father's murderous killing spree. But this never came to fruition, I guess. And then, like 3 years later, I think we got Wes Craven's New Nightmare. So, so that's all the trivia I got here. Pretty interesting. Again, just a really fun, just wild ride of a movie that I just like. I think if you don't look too deep into it, if you just enjoy it surface level, it's a good time. You know, I've seen this movie I think probably like 4 times in my life. You know, it definitely wasn't one that I'm like, oh man, can't stand it, we'll never watch it again. You know, I keep coming back to it, especially when I want to watch the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. I watch it like 1 through 7 because I have no problem doing so. There's no like one that I think is like a slog or is particularly hard to get through or anything like that, especially, you know, this one. I think this one is definitely just as good as part 5, better than part 5. And I think like people hate on part 2 a lot, but again, I think part 2 is great as well. And part 2 I think has like the dewy cinematography of the time, which makes things like so much easier and better to watch. I don't know about easier, but easier for me anyway. But yeah, even though this one doesn't really have that because it was filmed in 1991 and they kind of had gotten rid of that, I don't know. It's still a good movie, watchable. Like it's it still like looks good. But yeah, that's all I've got for this one. That is all I got for Freddy's Dead: The Final Nightmare. So again, I'll have new episodes coming out. 4 more episodes in the sequel summer series coming out, 4 or 5, depending on how productive I am. So we'll see. I know I want to do maybe possibly Alien Resurrection, maybe Predator, like not the Predator, the first one, because that's classic, but like maybe like The Predator or Predators, maybe one of those. So we'll see. We'll just see what's next. And I appreciate you listening to this, and I appreciate you if you listened to any of the other ones, and I thank you for your time. And I hope that you have a pleasant evening. And it looks like this one came out in an hour and 50 minutes, so a little shorter than the previous installments, but still pretty standard. But again, thank you so much, and I will see you next time. All right.